Hey everyone, my name is Samantha and Remoy.
My name is Remoy George Philip the First.
And this is Masculinity. So we've had the opportunity to cover a wide range of topics so far about masculinity and about gender. And so with the recent, with our Secretary of Education, Bessie
Shout out to
DeVoe.
Betsy, I hate your last name.
She's the worst. Anyway, wanting to roll back Title IX guidelines on for sexual assault on college campuses. While we're not necessarily going to be talking about that exactly today, which we'll circle back to at another time, we definitely wanted to address education and like gender within the context of education. So today on the show, we're very excited.
So hyped.
I'm like super excited about the show.
Can't see Sam's face right now, but she's smiling ear to ear right now. It's great.
So we're going to be talking about single-sex education. So for those of you who don't know what single-sex education is, it's basically kind of what it sounds like, boys and girls attending school separately. So whether that's, all boys schools, all girls schools, or all girls classes, or all boys classes. So that can be in the context of like, primary education, secondary, so like high school, middle school, colleges. To help us navigate this very complex world, we've got two very special guests here today. That would be Regine Roy and Barry Cooper.
That's right.
So Regine is the founder and CEO of Queen Geniuses, which is an organization that's dedicated and was created to strengthen the growth and development of teenage girls in low-income communities, which is amazing, amazing work. And then Barry Cooper originally was scheduled as a dean of Eagle Academy for Young Men from the Ocean Hill campus in Brooklyn, but has since, created his own ventures, doing big things in this world. So
I follow in the footsteps of my sister here.
Okay.
So I started my new company. It's entitled the Inner You Project. So I still work with young men of color, single gender. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you both for being here. It's very nice to have this happen. Like, I'm excited for this conversation, and it's very important for this to get out there and for people to really get like the importance of young kids being empowered. So,
and I think it's important for people to understand what single-sex education means, what it looks like, what it can look like, and not kind of have it isolated in one kind of, this is what I think it means, but to know like the diversity of what that could be.
Okay, great. So without further ado, Regine, thank you for being here. We're going to start with you, and we'd love to hear a little bit about what your work is and what had you started.
I am originally from Brooklyn, New York. Actually, Flatbush, Brooklyn, to be exact. My family's from the Caribbean, from Haiti. And I grew up really poor, like one-bedroom apartment, 7 of us kind of like crunched into this tiny little home together. And when I was 15 years old, my oldest brother, Greg, he passed away. And he had a very rare form of multiple sclerosis. And pretty much he was 24 when he got diagnosed. I was 15, he was 30 when he passed away. And we had watched him just deteriorate within a year. He was in pre-med school. And within a year, he was bedridden, blind, couldn't hear anymore, was eating through a catheter. Wow. And for me, when he passed away, I was in my junior year of high school, and I went to one of the worst high schools in the city, Washington Irving, but it was amazing for me. And I was just like, this cannot be life. Like, I just remember, like, thinking, like, I was 15 years old, and I was like, this cannot be it. And, it was, like, kind of like the beginning of me opening up to people in my school community, teachers, social workers, my friends, and learning how to communicate with them in a way where I was getting what I needed. People knew what was going on. And I think that for me, that was like the genesis of like, oh, wow, like vulnerability is actually opening the door. It's not the thing that's like shutting me out. Like that, my brother's death, I was like, all right, things could go any way. What can I do to steer it in like the best direction possible?
So then how does that translate to like you empowering young women, and like how exactly does that work happen?
So how does it happen? When I went to college, I majored in Africana and women's studies, and I think at a young age, like I was always like really clear that I was like obsessed with Black people, like older, like Black women, though.
Okay.
You know, like I got introduced to Africana studies. I got introduced to gender studies, and I was like, wow, like this is amazing. But of course, like graduating, I was like, what am I going to do with these degrees? So I got a master's degree in social work, and that was kind of like what began to tie everything together. I ended up doing an internship at Medgar Evers College in their Women's Center, and I got to work with this guru and social activist. Her name is Sophia Bendelli. She's like, I think like 73 now. Amazing. She's retired, and I got to work with her in her last year of retirement.
Wow.
And it was amazing because like this woman had worked as the director of the Center for Women's Development at Medgar Evers for like 30 years. And she was like, you know, friends with Black Panthers. Her husband is like still incarcerated. She still visits him for like over 30 years to this day. And like just the grassroots foundation was just like, that's me, you know? Like I wouldn't have majored in the majors that I majored in if that wasn't my core. But seeing her be the director, I was like, wow, like I could do something like this. Like I could be a director of something for women. I ended up getting a job in state politics for 4 years, totally left field. And I was like, this is not woman-centered work. This is not my work. But, you know, like, I was like, this is important work. I'm working in the community that I grew up in. I am, you know, I get to work with Haitian people because I was working in the community that I worked in. I got to practice my Creole, which is still terrible, but, you know. But, you know, like, working with the state senator, it was like, okay, well, how could I maximize on this experience? And so I asked him my first year there. I had just turned 25. I asked him, hey, I want to do a conference for girls in this district, and I don't have the resources, so let's partner. And you could get all of this awesome credibility because your name will be splashed all over it, and I will be able to use your resources, and we'll be able to do great work together. And I honestly think that he, like, thought it was just, like, a joke, you know? Like, I don't think that he took it very seriously initially until it happened. And then it happened again. And then it happened again. I remember in the beginning of like this journey, I was just like, oh, it's time for me to go. And I've been working as an educational consultant with Queen Geniuses ever since. So what I do is I go into schools all over New York City, but particularly in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I, you know, talk to principals about my program. And I have a Reclaiming Your Throne program. But, you know, I pretty much work with about 15 to 20 girls at a time. And we talk about all sorts of things. And we do a very particular technique called sociodrama that I could talk to you guys about a little later. But it's amazing.
So actually,
that's a hell of a story. I like it.
It's really nice.
Thank you. There's so much more.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get to it.
Well, yeah, let's get into it. So, like, what material? So, when you say sociodrama, like, what do you cover within that? Like, what is sociodrama, and like, what's the point? What happens?
Sociodrama is technique. So there's something called the bigger technique is actually sociometry. Okay. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to tell you what it is. It's actually kind of really cool.
Yeah.
So sociometry is the measurement of emotions. Okay, because like you can measure lots of things, right? But like when it's like emotions, like, you know, like sadness and rage are different. But, like, those two emotions could very much coincide with each other. Right. So how do you get students or people, because you could do sociometry with anybody, but, like, how do you get people to really start thinking about their emotions in a fun way, but also in a way where they're getting to experience, like, catharsis, where they're able to, like, release their emotions, where they're able to, like, you know, experience insight and all of that stuff. So an example of sociometry would be, okay, so like I shared with you guys, I have a Reclaiming Your Throne curriculum, right? Well, if you are a queen genius, gentlemen in the room are king geniuses.
Thank you for the separation.
I'm cool with being a queen too.
King geniuses and queen geniuses. But if you are a king genius or a queen genius, you have an empire that you govern over.
I am into that. Okay, let's get into
it. So you have an empire that you govern over, and that empire is your life. So with the group of students, I would really just get them first. I would really have them get into the mode of their queen geniusness, right? So I'd be like, all right, well, how would you sit on your throne? So they're some students are super prissy, kind of like me. And then the other student, I'll have other students putting their legs up on the top of the chairs, and they're like, this is how I would sit on my throne. And I'm like, all right, whatever. It's your queendom. You do whatever you want. But, so it's fun. And then I would really just have them start brainstorming, what are some of the different aspects of your life, right? So they're education, they're money, they're success, self-esteem. They're just saying all of these different things, right? And then it's okay, great. Now that we know, what your life is, consistent of, why don't we learn how you could begin to assess how you govern over those different areas, right? So this is the sociometry part. So I would put 4 pieces of paper down on the floor, 1 piece of paper in each corner, right? And one paper would say, powerfully sitting on the throne. The other paper would say, 1 butt cheek on the throne, 1 butt cheek off the throne. Another paper would say hiding behind the throne. And then the 4th paper in the 4th corner would say in the possibility of being dethroned, right? So we would, of course, talk about what each paper means. But then I would say something like, all right, choosing one of the things on the board, why don't we start with school, keeping it super simple? When it comes down to your schoolwork, how would you say you're governing over that aspect of your life?
Wow.
And then they go to different sections, right? That's the measurement. Because if you're powerfully governing over your throne, it's very different from how you being in the possibility of being dethroned. It's very different from you sitting 1 butt cheek on the throne, 1 butt cheek off the throne, or hiding, right? So, then they talk about it. So this group of young people who probably never talk to each other or don't care to talk to each other suddenly are now warmed up to this idea of what it means for them to assess how they're leading. And then it gets them thinking, what do I need to do to take that area of my life to the next level? But in a safe space, in a safe environment. That's just a little piece of it. It gets so much deeper because that's just talking about the sociometry part of it.
Sure.
The drama part is where they learn how to role play, which is a whole nother thing. But it's so much fun. It's so engaging. Barry knows that I'm an empowerment nerd. I'm always just how do we get people to start thinking about their lives? And, I think it's because growing up in Flatbush, growing up seeing a lot of the people that I grew up with die, including my brother, but also just senseless violence. It's if young people or if adults were engaged in these conversations that had them thinking about their lives in a way that had them be excited about it as opposed to being resigned about it. What's possible?
No, it's deep because a lot of people don't have the space or know that they have the tools to take a step back and really assess their lives and see their lives as theirs. And what's cool is you're giving them the tools to do so.
Yeah.
And it's huge to be able to look at your life and be oh shit, this is my life. This isn't just moment to moment living. This is my life, and I have some sort of control over it and where my future could go.
That's really awesome. And I guess my first question is, first I want to know about some of the other areas that you tackle. So outside of school, other things you talk about, and I also want to know what makes the all girls environment conducive to having you do that work?
Because I don't want to work with boys.
I knew that was going to be the answer.
At all. I personally just like the male ego is something that triggers
it's
me.
huge.
We have this argument all the time.
The male ego, and like, and on one end, like I could see it as like empowering and like amazing, and I'm like, yes, like have your ego, yay. But you know, like for me to like have to like work through that, I think also like just personally growing up in an abusive environment, that ego and that like machismo triggers the hell out of me. So, you know, I probably would like end up wanting to like fight one of my male students. So I think, but I could really work with with young women. Like I really get like, you know, the emotion and, you know, like what is sometimes seen as like crazy or whatever, you know, people want to call it. Like I'm able to work through that in a way that with young men, I feel like I get just personally very impatient and I want to like beat somebody up. Okay. So it's just, for me, it literally is a preference. Like I can't work with young men. I work with professionals. But even when I have like, I'm working with a male principal, like I find myself kind of like twitching. So, you know, and I have a boyfriend and he's awesome and I love him.
You twitch with him too?
I twitch all the time and he knows it. So, you know, like I love men. I used to be boy crazy. I still kind of am boy crazy, but I
You don't want to teach them.
I just don't want to teach them.
Okay.
They're not for me.
Okay. Do you talk about femininity in the context of Queen Geniuses? Like, do you address gender at all?
Of course. I think, but for me, like, especially with the practice of sociodrama, when you're getting trained in this technique, a big thing is that they share is like, as the director, you know, if I'm the facilitator, if I'm the director, it is not my job to teach the students how they need to show up.
Okay.
Right? At all. Because if I am now in the role of teaching them what femininity is, then they never have an opportunity to really explore that for themselves. I know that I am a girly girl. I like that about myself. But if I'm in a room with like someone who identifies as LGBTQ or, you know, like someone who actually says that they are a dyke, right? And they identify as that, who am I to say that the way they show up as a feminine is wrong? Like, it's not my job.
Great.
So, like, what I love about sociodrama is like these students that I work with, but anyone who does it, you really have an opportunity to explore certain topics for yourself. So if we end up doing femininity sociodrama, then, and you know, like usually in sociodramas, the students are creating characters, right? So after a warm-up similar to the one that I talked about with the different parts of the throne, it could end up, I could say, okay, now let's create a student. Let's create a young lady. How old is she? What does her body look like? What is she dealing with in her life? And if the theme is femininity, then the students in the room are creating the character. And then someone plays that character. And then maybe someone plays her mother, and possibly someone plays her teacher or her boyfriend or her girlfriend. You know what I mean? And then inside of those roles, people are now beginning to like explore like, oh, what does femininity mean to them? And of course, as they're thinking about that one central character that they created, of course, their minds are thinking, well, what does femininity mean to me? And that's how they begin to like process it. But it's not my job. And that gives me a lot of freedom. Because
And them too.
Because it's like, who really has a say? Like, nobody but you.
Do you talk about a sex education at all? Or how do you deal with like relationships or like how like interactions in their lives with like people in their lives? Or is it all a creation?
I work with teenage girls, right? I've learned a lot over the years, like working with groups of students. And I used to say this hashtag with my students, I would say hashtag vulnerability is sexy, right? And it would really like be to give them the freedom to talk about things that they've dealt with and like, you know, just say it, like just get it out of the way. However, I've also learned working with teenage girls that they talk a lot. You could create that confidentiality agreement, but it doesn't matter if someone is beefing with somebody else in the group. That whatever was said in that room could easily go out. Mm-hmm. So I've really learned like if we are going to be talking about sexuality, it is safer to talk about it in the context of a character, as opposed to having them speak about it in a group to each other, right? Mm-hmm. So of course sexuality is being brought up, and we're talking about value, we're talking about self-worth. So that's how, if a young lady's vulnerable enough to share a story like that, which they do, you know, sometimes that's how we talk about it. Mm-hmm.
I was reading this article in the New York Times recently that was talking about single-sex education and that wanted people who had participated or, you know, had gone through school in single-sex schools or classes and shared their experience. Most of the people who posted were women, and they were talking about, like, you know, they felt a lot more empowered to, you know, take things on in life. They felt really confident and secure in themselves, and they felt really... They felt excited about their future professionally because they knew they were going to succeed. And the one resounding thing that each of them said was that, you know, but they felt a little bit awkward about now going out into the world and being being in such close proximity to guys like all the time and like not really knowing how to navigate that. And, you know, when I was thinking about that, I really saw Queen Geniuses as, you know, kind of the perfect medium between, you know, being like attending a co-ed school, but then also having this like space of sisterhood and community where you can really be vulnerable and like share your experiences.
Yeah, I think for myself and just working with young ladies in co-ed environments and then taking them out, they are now free to say things that they typically possibly would not say in front of young men. Or if there's a guy in the room that they like or they have a crush on, or, you know, like if you are LGBTQ and you don't feel comfortable sharing like your position on like sexuality around men, you really want to, young men, you want to explore that around, you know, women, because for whatever reason, maybe it's a little easier or maybe it's not. But like, I mean, like, for someone who was and still kind of is boy crazy, like, it's so much easier for me to process things with other women and then to bring those, like, solid thoughts and ideas and ideations to co-ed environments. I feel safer to think. I feel safer. I'm not distracted. I think that that's the case for many young women. I think for, you know, and Barry could probably talk about this. I'd love to hear from you about this, Barry. But like, as privileged as men are in general, the one thing that I know for sure that I feel for men is like them not generally having these beautiful spaces to express themselves. And, you know, like just recently, just a few months ago, an ex-boyfriend of mine committed suicide. You know, like, he was beautiful, like a beautiful man. He had 2 kids. He had been suffering from depression. I didn't even know that. And I was his ex-girlfriend. Like, you know, like, it's just, like, it's like, what if he felt comfortable telling someone about that? Like, what if he had that environment of, you know, like his peers where he was able to like talk and cry and get angry and like not be judged for it. Those like separate environments are important because like men are pressured to be men all the time.
Yeah. This is a perfect segue to, you know, really talk to you, Barry, about, you know, the work that you've done. I mean, you know, prior to today, I didn't actually realize that you had done so much work outside of education with, young men. And so I just wanted to talk to you about your work at Eagle Academy, talk to you about your work in general.
So, I mean, just to be in alignment with the way the conversation is going, I think that, as men, we do have like certain access to certain things, right, in society, because, unfortunately, we live in a kind of like male-dominated society as far as like who governs the most, who makes certain laws and rules and things like that. Like the images we see are, of men. But I think with that privilege comes a certain level of like misconception. It kind of like puts this weight on who we truly are on the inside. And that's the reason why I named my company the NAU Project, because a lot of times as men, we are told how to be. Yeah. So when we have those certain emotions or those certain feelings, or we're feeling depressed and so on, like all of these things that are happening that people can't see, we suppress it and we suppress it and we suppress it, and we try to put these shields up, and we try to be everything that, women feel like we should be, or society as a whole puts on us. And then next thing you hear stories of what just Regine just said, a man committing suicide. And it's so shocking, right? And jarring to hear, what? Him? No way. Like, it's impossible. He presented this way because, this is what we're told we're supposed to be. So, working in an all-boys school, I've been able to, have the privilege to unpack that. And I think the reason why it's good to have that separation is so that, as a man, we know what we feel. And then we can kind of have a peer that we can sit next to. And once he says, yo, I didn't like this, or this happened to me, having that person who's like been through that same type of situation or that same type of struggle makes it easier, where if we're in a room with women, right, we have to like put this mask on. Yeah. Because we don't want to show what one would consider weakness or so on and so forth. So I think that, working in a single gender school and having the privilege to be there for 6 years, I've been able to, see young men, in their vulnerability states and be able to talk. And I think another thing that was really dope is that, every sex has their different type of groups, right? Like, so for men, you have your alpha male and then you have your introvert, where if it's a co-ed environment, you have the women there who kind of like buffers that, where the alpha male is only focused on the women, and then that introvert is like sitting in the corner. Where in the all boys environment, what I find is like now there's nobody to buffer that, and they actually become friends. So you'll have like a varsity player who's on a football team who now has a friend who loves anime, or may have a friend who doesn't identify with a certain sex, or who may be, LGBTQ, right? Like, and they able to like coexist in the same space socially, and they have, as young men or even women, they tease each other, and you still experience some levels of bullying, but it's a certain kind of like brotherhood and understanding of different people, and how we operate as human beings first, that I've been able to experience. Like, you have guys who grow up and they're best friends, but one may be gay and one may be heterosexual, but they're fine with that. Like, this is what you do, but you're still my bro, or you're still my friend. So that's been really good for me. Like Regine said, doing the work that I do, even outside of Eagle, is more of a personal thing, right? Like, I communicate well with women. I had 2 sisters growing up, with those like my best friends. So I'm in a position where I could kind of like have conversations with both. But when it comes to young men, because I, experience certain struggles, going through school and seeing sometimes how the tolerance level for young men, especially in academia and academics, especially like public school, it's a short fuse. So for young men, because we deal with things on the physical, we express our concerns. And unfortunately, a large number of educators are women. It's like this battle for power inside of the classroom. And now this young man at a larger number is displaced from the classroom. So now he's out of the classroom for all of these days. He can't come up, or he can't come back to the class until his mother comes up. His mom may be struggling or working a 12 to 12. And, seeing all of these struggles that young men go through it just pushed me to just want to teach them how to navigate their emotions in the struggle. Because I'm a firm believer that, because we live in the society we live in, unfortunately, we have a lot of situations where our young men in particular deal with, gangs. They're dealing with trying to understand what it means to be a man. They're trying to keep the house for their mother. So when they come to school, I feel like that's a place where it should be a utopia for them. So, I try to teach them how to understand their emotions. Like I tell them, your struggle is going to be there. Like when you leave out of this building, you're going to be faced with things that you cannot right now move from. You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to deal with when your mom come home and she had a hard day and she doesn't have a spouse to kind of like vent that to. She's going to do it with you. How do you not allow those emotions to make you make immature decisions or choices? So,
wow, yeah.
And then I'm a micro thinker because I feel like as long as I can get them to think every situation, then when they become men, they'll know how to deal with struggle better. So, a lot of times I also see that we want our young men to grow up way faster. It's like, oh, you got to be a man. You got to be, and I'm just like, no.
Like no space for just growing up.
Space for mistakes, where for young women it's like, oh, she's a girl, and I think that in those, I knew I was going to poke a nose with that with Regine,
we're going to get to it.
But it's real on our side, right? Like this is what we see. So, a boy is never really able to express himself emotionally. Like in no way, shape, or form. Even when you get them in the room, like you can get a group of girls in the room and they'll start talking about their feelings. It may be surface, but they at least acknowledge it. When you get a group of guys in the room and you start saying, well, how did you feel about that? All they want to do is just talk about the situation. It's so hard for them to even say, like, I was happy in that. They just want to just talk about the situation. And I'm like, no, how did you feel? Like, I got to like go very deep with them. And then after a while, once you get them to that space, you see them open up and then you see this beauty of this individual and they walk out even more empowered, I think. So I think that single gender schools in particular are very good. I think they're there for a certain family. I would not say that one is better than the other. I just think that when it comes to either if it's an all-girl school or a boys' school, that environment, you're able to kind of like have direct impact on the social construct of who those individuals are, and without distraction, in a sense where, and again, you can have young men who are alpha males deal with introverts and everybody's coexisting in the same space and they're able to build a certain level of friendship. And I think that that's important, especially in today's society where there's so much oppression and so much judgment. When a young man goes into a big university and he's seeing all of these different guys and men in particular where he may see a man who may present differently from him, he's not in there like, I can't deal with that because he had a glimpse of it from one of his peers. I think that helps him develop relationships better than, any other young man. So
I got a stupid question. Like, are all the staff, like teachers, deans, everywhere, are they all males?
Well, in Eagle Academy, in particular, the Eagle Academy I work for, Ocean Hill and Ocean Hill Brownsville, we literally had the largest male populated staff, I think, across the country.
Wow.
So I think that it's good. Even, certain staff members, I think we needed to do a better job on, giving them the tools on how to, have relationships and be men in front of young men. So that's something that I think as an institution we're working on. But I do think it's good, because I think that's the only time a lot of them are able to see what a man looks like, a hardworking man who, is not on television, is not, this false image of what they think a manhood is like these everyday workers, family men come in, young guys that we have working on our staff who can kind of like relate to them on so many different levels. We have our jocks, we have our anime guys, we have our drama guys. So, there's a guy in the building or a man or educator in the building that can relate to any of those young men. So I think it really definitely plays is a huge impact.
This is really this is really great because I feel like when I first heard of single sex education, because I had heard like single sex like colleges, right? And I had never really stopped to think about like, you know, elementary schools and like middle schools where it's, you know, boys and girls specifically. And when I first heard of like, you know, the ACLU has like a lot of different initiatives to like basically combat single sex education. And like all the things that I heard were not about this, like not about like, you know, fostering environments where, you know, boys and girls can learn and be comfortable sharing themselves with one another, you know? Like a lot of the discourse out there is actually about people like thinking that boys and girls learn differently, and like girls have to be like in a nurturing environment and guys have to be like in a confrontational environment, which I found to be fundamentally crazy. And I was like, how can you build a whole platform of single sex education on these like kind of falsified
It's false.
like differences that you call fundamental and biological when they're not fundamental and biological? Like that completely denies like young boys of their vulnerability and young women of their leadership.
They don't really talk about it. See, the thing is that when it comes to emotions, human beings don't like dealing with it.
Right.
Right. So when it comes to single sex schools, I think that me personally, I think that everybody learns the same, you know, intrinsic and extrinsic, right? Like, so you have somebody, whether it's a boy or girl, who has to be motivated by the environment, right? Then you have that other person who, no matter what's going on in their lives, no matter what's going on in the school, they're going to get their work done. That's human traits. But I think, so when it comes down to academia, whether it's math, science, social studies, you need to know what type of learner do you have first. Then I think that you need to set up a social component inside of the building where you can kind of separate the two genders, right? And allow them to explore what they're going through and how they able to like decipher the world. And then I even think that at some point you need to bring them two together, right? And have social components where you build a level of understanding, because I think socially and emotionally we kind of like, as men and women, we deal with things differently. We still all show emotion, right? But we deal with it differently. We need to, one, identify it, right? So you separate the genders, and then you bring them back together where you can like, okay, well, this is how I do it, and this is how you do it. And then I believe that that's how, in the long term, we'll be able to build healthier relationships where we're not seeing so many homes being broken apart and things like that.
And when you say, just to kind of like deepen that a little bit, when you say we do things differently, can you talk a little bit? Because I'm feeling a little bit of a nature versus nurture conversation. Shout out to you, Remoy. Like about like how we do things differently. Like, can you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, unfortunately, we have conditioned in the society, right? Like, so there's a construct of how a man, quote unquote, is supposed to operate in a society, and it's a construct of how a woman is supposed to operate. So, you know, our parents, they put these things in us, and if you don't have a space to go to that combats that thinking, then as you get older, no matter if you're 9 or 99, that's how you're going to operate. Where social emotional people, like, you know, the work that we do with social emotional intelligence, if institutions put more of us inside of the buildings, we can kind of like have the young people question what they've been conditioned to do. And then they can go home and question their parents, and it builds conversation.
And if they can't question their parents, then at least they have the insight to, you know, like, okay, well, you know, my mother is of a certain generation, or my mother or father has experienced certain things. That does not have to be me because I live with them. They get to, you know, really have the opportunity to choose, like, who do I want to be and why do I want to be that? And I could begin to construct this individual as opposed to being a victim of your environment.
Yep.
It's almost eye-opening or illuminating in the sense that we don't look at education as being a safe space for students, or we haven't allowed it to be a safe space, and a safe space for people to assess who they are on wherever in the gender spectrum or wherever they are socioeconomically, wherever, but then also be empowered, like you said, to really explore that, tackle that. They don't have to have the answers right away, right? They're just kids, but they can learn through these experiences and grow through that and be in a space that is safe to nurture all that.
Right. I also just have to point out, there was this thing on television yesterday, the XQ schools, or this big television broadcast for, I think it was specifically for high school students. Jennifer Hudson, like just like huge. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, these lucky ass kids, you know, like I think it's also really important to emphasize that Barry and I work with students who are from low income communities. Like this, like the fact that they even have the opportunity to talk about their social, emotional, you know, just experience, their personal social, emotional experience, it's a privilege within itself. Because usually the schools that we work at don't even have the budgets for the programs that we provide. But for me, it is so important, and I know this is true for Barry as well, that we are working with people who are from communities that we grew up in. Because, you know, I may not have all the money in the world, but, you know, I and Barry were able to make it out we were able to make it out of that, you know, like poverty paradigm. And, you know, we're able to like really see what's happening to our community from the outside looking in. And from that perspective, we could then go in and do the work that we do. There are different types of learners and all of this stuff. But, you know, like when you're dealing with like a low-income community school where parents are stressed, where, you know, their principals and teachers outside of our communities are coming in and, you know, like being expected to teach our children who like don't necessarily have the experiences that these privileged people have come from. Like, it's just, you know, like there's so much, there's just so much going on. So I think it's just really important, like as we're talking about education, this class component is really emphasized. The race component is really emphasized. Perfect, it doesn't make sense for, you know, someone who, it's not even just, you know, like the fact that I'm a Black woman going into a school and doing work with schools. It's also like the fact that you need to be trained to do this type of work. You can't just have anyone go in and sit down with a group of students and like start talking to them about their emotions. Like, that is wrong.
And just to add to that,
so wrong.
And just to add to that, like I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking like, no, I don't know any companies, and I mean I could be wrong, but when you think about like social emotional development, a lot of curriculums that you see, and even what they teach teachers is like compounded with racism, right? Like, so it's before you can even go, because before you can even go inside and get to know who the young person is, you got a curriculum that's designed to teach them that no matter what happens, they're gonna like always be in this box instead of just focusing on the individual and their emotions, right? Like, so that's why because I worked in the school, and you know, we've had social components, and it becomes so, you know, teachers get so stressed out because now if I am of a different race and I got to stay in a room full of young people who are not of my race, and then I got to teach them about this history, it builds a level of uncomfortability. It builds a high level of distrust, right? And it's just like people are unwilling to deal with the root cause. And it's like, how do you feel about this? Yeah. And I think that the one thing that we have been able to do, with Regine having Queen Genius and me having the NU project, is like we kind of like try to like move all of that stuff away, get them to kind of like focus on who they are, right? How they feel, and then work them up into understanding what the world is so that they can have better context. Right. Because I don't even think as adults.
So brilliant. Yeah.
As adults, we don't even have context of how we feel and how to navigate those feelings about ourselves first, our family second, and then the greater world, you know? So I would, and I think one of the things that, you know, and I know Regine, I could, you know, because we work so close together, we're going to push for is to change the social approach to individuals and human beings inside of the school, because that's where young people spend most of their time. And if those signals are crossed and then they go home to a world that may be, you know, not stable, we just keep raising young people, or we keep raising adults to have all of this misconception and judgment. So, you know, we have to be conscious of our feelings. We have to be conscious of those things. how we feel about racism, how we, how does it make us feel when you walk into a room where it's predominantly white people? Do you get that tense feeling, right? Like you need to talk about that as a human being first. So, I think that's the major problem with that. And you even find principals who, when they have to go deep and they have to dig deep inside of themselves, they can't do it themselves. So, we have to really change our approach to this social and educational component in our schools.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you both mentioned, or at least alluded to, is like how when you're dealing with or creating an environment that's single sex, right? There's like an element of distraction and an element of like done away with, and which creates like a safer space. And I really see that when you don't have that opposition, like how you were saying, Barry, like, if there's a woman present, then the camaraderie between two boys is eliminated because we gotta vie for her attention now. I'm alpha, you're beta, so you're gonna stay over there. What I gotta do, what I have to do over here, right? And so I think like eliminating the opposition so that they can really focus on themselves is kind of a parallel when you're thinking about race and class, right? Like you have to eliminate that opposition or distraction, like looking at people who are like obviously racially the dominant people in society. If you've got white folks, then you got to think about like, okay, well, I'm black, like I'll speak for myself. Like I'm Cameroonian, I there's not a moment that I walk into a room full of like white people or French people that colonization is not right there for me. Not one. It's never ever not happened. Even if like the second later it's gone, like it still happens every single time, and I'd like to, I'm 32. I'd like to think that I've done like a lot of work to kind of like eliminate those things. You're thinking about somebody who's like 8, somebody who's like 7, and they kind of grow up to have that be there for them, not just, racially, but like gender wise, class wise. I mean,
and to that, I think that when you have a queen genius, right? The thing is that triggers are triggers, emotions are emotions. Like that'll never leave you. Every time you walk in a room, you're gonna be like,
yeah,
okay. But then you tap into your queendom, and it's just like,
exactly.
Oh, okay, I'm all the way on this throne, so I'm okay.
Yes.
Right? Like you need. That's when you put your shields up, right? That's when you like, okay, let me put this armor on in this space because this is what I need.
Right.
That's the most important. So like even for the NU project, it's like you walk into a room. I have young men who say, "Yo, I'm not smart. I'm dumb." So when they walk into certain spaces, they don't want to speak. When you walk into the room, you're gonna feel like, okay, there's a whole bunch of smart people in here, and then you just say, okay, this is my feeling. This is what I'm feeling, but I got to get through this.
Yes.
And then that he's able to navigate. And it's the same thing for white people, right? They don't have understanding of us. So when they walk into spaces, I'm pretty sure white teachers who come inside of, educational institutions that's in the heart of Brownsville, they like, do they think I'm Hitler's daughter? Right? Like, teaching them, right? Because they're humans too. Like, okay, let me access my queendom. I didn't do that. That's not who I am. But I need to come in and understand this society and respect it and have empathy for it. Not try to change it.
Yeah.
Right? Just come in and have empathy for it.
Yeah.
Right? If you walk in, and I even tell educators who are a different race, if you come in with an S on your chest, we're not looking for Superman. We're just looking for empathy. That's it, right? Like, and as long as you can kind of like navigate that emotion when you're in our space, then you won't be looked at with the Regine head. So, it's very important that as humans, we understand who we are, man, internally first, yo.
I love that we're just talking about feelings.
Yeah.
Because, like, at the end of the day, if you are really able to, like, deal with that and separate, like, this is a feeling. This is possibly not actually what's happening, but this is what I'm feeling. And, like, then you've got other people saying, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and this is not actually what's happening. Then it's like, all right, so let's discover a truth together.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly suppressing yourself, if you never have that space to like learn the difference between those two distinctions of feelings versus reality, like everything is, we don't really have a chance in that type of, a world.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think this really brings, like, at the end of the day, like, yes, we have created these single-sex environments, because like the world is so messy and so contrived that, you know, like we haven't learned to communicate with ourselves or with each other in powerful ways. So let's find spaces where we could like separate, regroup, relearn how to do this, rethink this through, and then enter this messy society that we live in and see like how we could navigate it.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I feel like, you know, this is a perfect, you know, time to wrap up. I just really want to thank you both for being here. This has been an amazing session. It's been very educational.
Because we both, me and Sam, like at least I didn't have like a full grasp or understanding of what single-sex education was, and I had my opinions, and it was very negative. It was very judgmental. I was like, this thing is stupid. Like, I don't get it. But now I understand, like, it really creates safety, and it creates space for individuals. Not just students, not just kids, not just boys, not just girls, but individuals.
And we haven't even spoke about sex.
Word.
Like, there's like all of,
Absolutely.
those,
to get to that part,
right?
This
Like,
is
that's a whole nother thing.
But it helps them like just look at themselves
Right.
and assess themselves and have the safety to do all that, and then be empowered to even move further into that. So that's huge.
Yeah, you know, like, I just think that, you know, without this happening today, I would still be in my, like, yeah, you know, the ACLU needs to do away with single-sex education. Like, nobody needs that and all of that. And it's like, you know, having this conversation and really getting where people are coming from and really getting what students are actually dealing with that you would just not be able to get connected to if you didn't have those spaces. So, you know, thank you for doing the work that you do. Like, it's so important. And there are any plugs that you want people to know about? Like, you know, I'm going to be putting your websites and all of that up on our masculinity page, the Facebook page, so people can have access to it. But if you have any things that you guys want to share with the public.
I mean, you can follow me on Instagram at @BCooperLive, at @BCooperLive. And I do have an event coming up in October that I'm really pushing. It's the first annual Brothers Block Party. So it's in Bedford-Stuyvesant at the John Hancock Playground. So me and a few of my, you know, peers, we've seen the charge that our sisters have been taking with Black Girls Code, Black Girls Rock, Circle of Sisters, and this is something.
Magic.
Yeah, Black Girl Magic. So we're trying to create some magic of our own with men. So we started the Brothers on the Block Coalition. Our sole purpose is to kind of like decrease the negative images of men of color and, you know, increase it with all of the positive men of color and the things that we're doing. So we're having our first annual Brothers Block Party. So it's like the brother version of Curl Fest in a sense. So you're gonna have vendors, ladies. You know, when you listen to the podcast, you can come and probably find your potential husband, soulmate. So we're gonna, and then not only are we having the block party, that's October 8th, the week of, from October 2nd to 7th, we having the Brothers on the Block Summit, where we're having different workshops. I just recently put out a book entitled The Provider, a guide for co-parents and fathers. So we're having a parent fatherhood. We partnered with the CUNY Fatherhood Academy, so they're gonna bring all of their fathers out. We're having a panel on how to be a busy dad, because a lot of times men kind of like try to put their work before their children, and you know, our children lose out. So we got, like, I got City Councilman Robert Cornegie, my friend Richard Beavers, who owns an art gallery, DJ Booth, who DJs for Fabulous and Nicki Minaj, and my guy Giant, who's the engineer over at Radio 103.9. They're gonna be on the panel and just talking about how to be a busy dad and still be impactful in your children's lives. So yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Oh, that's it?
I know, right?
That's it.
Amazing.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Yo, mad props.
And I could be found at Queen Geniuses on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm currently getting my website revamped. I will be at regineroy.com, where you will see all of the slew of services that I provide, because I don't only work with girls. I work with professionals as well. And lastly, in March of 2018, I know it's ways away, but I will be having my 6th annual Queen Geniuses Girls Empowerment Conference.
Awesome.
If you are interested in bringing your students, please reach out to me at queengeniuses@gmail.com, and I will be happy to talk to you more about that.
Dope. Thank you, guys. So everyone, thank you for listening. Again, you can find us at Masculinity Pod on Twitter. Masculinity Podcast on Twitter. That's Masculinity with a K. please be sure to check out Barry's and Regine's work on our Facebook page, which is at Masculinity Pod. This has been an amazing podcast. Thank you all again. Once again, my name is Samantha and
Yo, my name's Remoy George Philip the First.
And this has been Masculinity, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.